It's been a couple minutes. Yeah, call the meeting to order. Brett, if you'd like to do roll call.
Yes. Casey Crichton.
Here.
Denise Bacon.
Here.
Jeremiah Horton.
Here.
Leonard Rydell. Merrill Kunkel.
Here.
Mike Ugler.
Here.
Peter Sedaris.
Here.
All right. So new business. Brett, I think this is you. You have a policy discussion, or excuse me, a presentation, right?
Yeah, a little presentation. So basically pulled together some slides that are in your packet. Kind of from the discussions we've had previously, that it was definitely the committee has expressed an interest for talking about policies and what's current, maybe making changes to those, making recommendations for that. So we put together pulled some slides from a presentation we did for council back in October about stormwater in general and things that's going on there. So I pulled some things from there and added a couple things to kind of give some context to that discussion that you're looking to have, kind of to try to show what we have at the city currently between what's in the code, what's in our design standards specifically related to stormwater hierarchy and what kind of treatment standards and items. So I'm just going to kind of walk through those slides probably fairly quickly, just kind of work through that piece of it to help give some context to the discussion that's intended for the committee to have, that piece of it. And so kind of once we get through that, then to kind of open that up for discussion between yourselves to see the direction you'd like to go on making some recommendations or where that's going to go. So with that, I'll get this.
Oh, he got my name.
Oh, welcome, Leonard.
You're muted, Leonard.
There, how's that?
Except you got to change your name because I think you're in my, because I didn't realize it was an individual code there.
I don't know how to do that.
Okay, everybody knows Leonard is not me, right? Okay.
Well, you said that your name's right.
My name's right.
Yeah.
Well, Denise, I thought we were going through a Big Bang moment, and there was a Sheldon thing, and there was a metamorphosis that was going on.
It was a little beam me up, Scotty.
Well, Leonard, just announced you join, or that you were able to join us. I know we all have struggles sometimes getting into these meetings, so appreciate and bearing with it to get here. So just getting ready to start to give a presentation or just walk through the slides. It was included in the packet. This is to give some context to the discussion that's intended for the committee to have related to policy items and things related to stormwater that you're looking to do. So I'm just going to kind of walk through that. And then at the end, kind of open it up to the committee for their discussion. Screen up here. So hopefully you can see that now.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the next slide. So here's the development of stormwater management code, just a little bit of a history of where it started and where we're at. It's the 2012 ordinance created the stormwater municipal code that's in our current code, the chapter 13.25, and a portion of that is included in the and was included in the agenda packet. This is just an excerpt identifying the purpose and intent. And the purpose is basically a protection and maintain and enhance public health, safety, and general welfare, and having that minimum requirements for control. The intent is listed there with basically all of the items I believe have come up in the conversations to date, related to all the things we're trying to achieve. And then the public works and design standards, again, a little history of where that's at. They're constantly, or not constantly, but frequently evolving and changing. We are, as voiced, we're in the process of updating, making some updates to those standards, providing some clarity and eliminating inconsistent cross-references and items that we're kind of working through all of that across all of the design standards, not just the stormwater piece. any updates to that, I'll go through council and get adopted. And our current stormwater standards are following the City of Portland Bureau of Environmental Services and Clean Water Services standards. In general, they've been adapted for our local area back last round of updates.
Well, I sent you, then you mailed it out that the DEQ has come up with standards for small cities in Western Oregon. So I would like to see those included in our update.
Okay, well, that can be part of the discussion there. So this is just an excerpt from our current design standards. It shows the hierarchy. I mentioned before that we have an encouragement of the LIDA facilities, and what we have in the current standards is where a developer, the engineers related to the site, they need to work through that process to explain why they're not able to, if they find that the site isn't conducive to the LIDA facilities, and you use that to the maximum extent possible. So this is just an excerpt showing what we have in our current standards related to that.
Do the standards require a 2, 5, 10, 25-year stormwater detent or
Those are the design storms
for a single family house?
With the single family house and the LIDA, they do work with that form that we currently have. It accounts for those for single family homes using that criteria. So we can.
But do they require the detention for a 2, 5, 10, and 25-year storm?
The intent of those is to capture that, the way the current standards are written.
Well, Habitat for Humanity just got an engineering design for 2 of those that went through that 2, 5, 10, 25-year storm detention. And that would be, I just wondered if that was a requirement or just the engineer didn't know better.
That I'm going to have to defer. That's probably outside of what we're talking about right at this moment.
Well, it's an important thing because I've been told those facilities cost like $7,000 to $15,000 to install.
Okay.
And so it is a huge deal. And
I don't deny that. Not stating that. I'd like to get through this, just what we're presenting right now, and then we can open up the discussion. So backing up here. So the Tmdl plan is a big part of what within our stormwater standards in the code, and that's part of what was driving that is that creation of that plan. The plan gets updated every 5 years and with annual reports to DEQ of where we're at in that plan and the measures we're taking to meet the goals of that plan. And then this is just a slide to show that over the years and in the time that I've been with the city, which is just over approaching 3.5 years now, we've identified that there's some challenges that are encountered, things like Leonard is referring to, of as far as meeting, with the current standards we have. The idea is that there's some creativity that can be allowed for an engineer to present something different than the standards. The idea is that we have standards in the LIDA sizing form that allows for single family homes to be designed with that and follow those standards and the details that we have.
But that particular one, the city would not allow it to overflow into a stream corridor. It had to be piped to the curb, run down the gutter, into a catch basin, into the stream in a stream corridor.
Yeah, there can be a lot of different challenges and details to work out with any given site.
Well, why would you want to pipe it down the street instead of just letting it run over land like it does naturally?
It depends on all the criteria and things to be met.
Okay, what's the criteria that was not met by letting the water overflow, sheet flow into the stream corridor?
I don't have a specific answer for you for that particular project at this time, Leonard.
Well, then can you find out then before the next meeting or before we adopt anything?
We can work on that. And then this is just a slide with some terminology of the different types of facilities, regional facilities, the detention basins or large water quality swells, and the local facility types, rain gardens, infiltration planters, and flow-through planters. Flow-through planters are where the full infiltration is not possible, so they can be lined or not, depending upon allowing to allow some type of infiltration to occur. And then this is just another example of the challenges that we've identified as far as lots get smaller, it's more challenging to get facilities onto a site. And then the requirements for offsets from property lines and avoidance of having stormwater facilities in the PUEs that can create challenges for those utilities that get installed there. Building code requirements, keeping the infiltration stormwater facility 10 feet away from an offset from a building, combined with other items, create challenges with getting facilities on small lots.
I would like to go back to the public utility easement because it's a public utility, and what I've been designing, rain gardens are just a hole in the ground, like a foot deep, and you plant plants in it. Yet again, the city is determined to not allow it in the public utility because it's not a public utility because it's required by the public utility code.
Well, this next slide shows some of the issues that are encountered with the public utility easements and for what are the franchise utilities, power, communications, gas, that shows some of the items that get installed within those PUEs and the facilities running through there. So if a stormwater facility isn't in that location, it restricts that ability or reduces location of those items to be installed.
Even if it's in a developed subdivision, you can't go do it. And then I find the city seems to be applying the standard when there is no public utility easement.
Well, any developments are required to provide those easements and partitions that to provide that easement where they currently don't exist.
You know, you're killing the whole idea of this water quality stuff if you keep putting restrictions like that. We put landscaping, we landscape the front yards of our houses all the time. People grow trees. You have a picture there of some large arborvitaes, and there's no reason you can't put a rain garden in there. I just don't understand what your restrictions are. I mean,
Brett, can I ask, who determines the codes regarding public utility easements?
The code requires the easement that's in our current code.
Right, so that's determined by the city then?
Correct, and required through the code that's adopted by council.
Okay.
but generally all the utilities on new development, they have a code, so they put it on private property, so they don't have to get city permits to put it in. But they're all buried like 3 feet down. And generally there's what, phone, internet, electric, you know, what else is there? And
Yeah, and gas.
And gas.
Yes.
But those aren't affected with a rain garden, for an instance, built above it. So I don't see why we can't have a rain garden in a public utility easement.
Part of it is related to the maintenance for other facilities coming through there, and that rain garden has the challenges of being rebuilt if it gets impacted by the installation of utilities in the future.
Well, my partner, Jackie, built them for handicap. They go out a Saturday morning with 3 volunteers with shovels, and they dig and plant it in the morning. So it's not any more, in fact, it's probably less disruptive than those arborvitaes you show in your picture there. So I think you're being unreasonable. I understand that you don't want to build a rain garden where there's a power vault like they're showing, but I don't understand why you can't have one in your front yard.
I think that's something that we could make a recommendation about. When we get through this, I would recommend right now to change that. I just signed an easement with the city of Dundee but I can still plant within that easement. And I would like to put my rain gardens there. Even though it's not required on my property, but it's planting is planting. And if you have to tear it up for some reason, that can be replanted. It's not.
Part of that is related to the standards we currently have, like I was mentioning about for the LIDA facilities that allow for to be designed without an engineer, and actually is following those standards, actually call for a section that is deeper than what sometimes those utilities do get installed. And some of them are not fully at 3 feet, some of those. So they can impact those facilities as we have currently designed. Now that's a piece that we are gathering information in order to look at some of those designs and some of the tools that are out there that have been developed by from DEQ and for others, is to look at those or see if some of those are appropriate for our location in here.
Well, I know we accidentally cut the cable to my internet. And when they came out to fix it, they just did all the work in the street. They bored under everything. They replaced the culvert, the cable, reconnected my internet, and they were gone in like an hour and a half. And, you know, a rain garden there wouldn't have affected anything. So,
Well,
you know, I don't think you understand that you're making these more complicated than the average person that doesn't do this type of stuff for a living can overcome your objections. And we've got to make it so everybody in Newburgh builds a rain garden in their yard, and we need to encourage that.
Okay. Well, I think at this point, I've presented the information here. Maybe it's time for the committee. You can start your discussion there. And
So you have no more slides, Brett?
that's the last one there. Just kind of indicating that we recognize that these are challenges, and you know that's part of gathering information to see how we can. This is the first step of that, and others will need to be involved. Later in the agenda packet is the memo I indicated for, depending upon what recommendations come up, what other stakeholders, what other groups need to be consulted and brought into things to be certain there's not ripple effects of unintended consequences that can be on a negative side, not just it may not be positive. So
I could go back and look at my time, but I bet I spend 80% of my time trying to get my design approved through the city, just because of these objections with no practical issue. And I charge one client $700 to go through all this to get the city to allow it in the public utility easement. And then I gave him a goodwill credit of several hundred after that. And the bottom line is he never built it. They just piped the rain drain to the curb. So I went through all this work on mine, trying to get the city to get it approved. Finally got it approved. And then what happened? It never was built. You know, somewhere we've got to get the city in the position of encouraging these things to happen rather than continuing to throw up roadblocks all the time. And there's always things that can happen. We can dig up cables and such like that, but we need to make it so the average person can build one of these without putting all these stumbling blocks in the way. I find it frustrating, as you can probably tell.
Okay.
I agree with you, Leonard, on many things. Is there anything else from Pete? You said you had some suggestions.
Yeah, I agree with Leonard in that we should make as few stumbling blocks as possible for people to put in rain gardens. And if the public utilities are putting their services, not at the correct depth, that's not the homeowner's problem, that's the public utilities problem. If we go to a smaller lot size on a lot of these places, we're going to run into just having enough room to put rain gardens in. If you take the first 10 feet of their front yard and say you cannot have that kind of system there, well, then a lot of them are just going to be out of luck about even having any kind of rain capture system on their property, or their entire backyard's going to be taken up. And I mean, we should really have something where there's actually the city promotes that in that public utility easement at the front of your property, that here's some engineered rain garden stuff that you could do. You can go down to a maximum depth of 1.5 feet. You create a little berm around it. Your downspouts pipes run into that rain garden. We try to size it appropriately for the amount of hardscape they have, and that should be something that we should be pushing as a city, not discouraging in any way, shape, or form. And the natural place to put that is a public utility easement, as long as the slope of the property allows that.
I agree.
And I would say that I would like to propose that is a motion that the committee makes that as a recommendation to the city.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Let's vote. Pete, can you
Well,
phrase specifically
I
what
can-
the
Well, you might want to have some more discussion. It's just two of us that have spoken so far.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Sorry, thank you. I guess I
But,
was just gonna say,
it's
Pete,
the
can
motion-
you?
I'll summarize the
Thank you.
motion. That publicly utility easements on properties be able to be utilized as rain garden facilities. And that the city should come up with parameters that would allow homeowners to install rainwater capture systems on their property within the public utility.
And is this are we discussing this now, or is that the motion?
Yes,
The,
that's the motion, but now it's time to discuss.
okay, so what that is a recommendation. But if it becomes city code, is it possible that everybody could be required to put rain gardens in the PUE?
I would hope that it would become a requirement for all new construction. And it should become, if we're going to deal with the issues that we have, that should be a requirement for all new construction. And I think we do a lot of that already. You know, in some of the developments, they're building retention ponds in large areas within the development where they capture their stormwater off of the, you know, the hardscapes within that development. I mean, Mike, I'm sure when you develop here in the city, you have to have some kind of rain capture system, don't you?
Oh, yeah. See, the problem is that I worry about the unintended consequences in terms of, yeah, I agree. It makes sense if you can to do it. But once you build a rain garden, there is more maintenance required than without the main rain garden. And if you're building housing for seniors and you make it required that they maintain their rain garden and they can't, what are the consequences? What about a group home?
Well, if you go over and look at what Friendsview is doing, that they're completely moving that direction. They've put green roofs on. It's just a matter of will within the city itself. I mean, you go there, I've talked with Todd quite a number. In fact, he's taken me on a tour of all the things that they're doing in order to be a good steward of the storm.
And they deserve credit for that, but they have the resources and the organization, the hierarchy to maintain it. But old man Jones, who lives by himself, what's he going to do if he has difficulty with his walker while he's trying to clean out the rain garden?
Well, that's something, if they're already an established residence, but people have to understand that if it's a new residence, that's going to be part of the requirement of being able to live here. And so they would have to hire a landscaper, or we would get volunteer groups to go through and help with those things, but it's something that, you know, that's being.
You know, you're right, Pete, but my problem is wishes were fishes, we'd all be fed. And I worry about the fact that when we establish guidelines, it's too easy to go to where they're required without thought of consequences.
I have something to say. Oh, go ahead, Mike, finish.
No, I'm done.
I agree with you, Mike, because here's what happens. You require them, and then people build them, and then they don't maintain them, and then things go wrong, and the rain garden is to blame. So if you instead use the carrot and have some sort of encouragement that
You
they do
said
it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a fan of the early adopter thing where people are doing it right, and then it gives rain gardens a good name, and then the next phase may be the requirement if it all works. Because I do see what you're saying, Mike, that is going to be a huge issue, but if we credit people for it,
I mean,
people,
Well, I put in a number of rain gardens and on my own properties and on different installations around different pieces of property around the city. And really you can design them where your plant material fills in after 2 years and you really have very, very little maintenance. I mean, if you would have, you know, a volunteer group in the city or, but you know, this would be for homeowners that already exist. This would be something that would be encouraged by the city, that you would start publishing data, you know, on how much, you know, this helps our waterways, how much this helps our stormwater treatment facilities, all those things. You know, if we don't, this gets back to a question that I had earlier, Karin, about, you know, we don't know exactly how much water is coming out of each basin, essentially. You know, I need to ask the question, we must have stormwater pipes that run directly into the sewage system and share that same piping system. We don't. So all of that, so when we go from 4,000 million gallons per minute to 27,000 million gallons per minute in a rain event, that's the information that you gave me, then that's from infiltration into our pipes.
It's for there's a couple different things. It's infiltration into the pipes, whether it's leaky joints, roots grown into the pipes. There are occasionally, let me clarify my no answer. There are occasionally storm drainage laterals that get tied into the sewer system, but they're not supposed to. Those are so no, it has to do with leaky pipes. Whether it's clean outs that don't have caps on them, so they're a 4-inch hole in the ground and rainwater goes directly into them. People that pour things down the manholes. So it comes in that regard. And one, I'll give you a little bit more information, Pete, is we've actually found in the last, we've been doing data on, you know, the rain event versus the amount that is hitting our treatment plant. And what I will say is 6 years ago, we were at 21, the numbers I gave you. This past week, the same rain event, and we're down to 14. So what we're doing in the sewer system, doing all of the I&I work, the lining of the pipes and replacing of old bad pipe, is doing good work. So we're going to be continuing down that path.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question so I can make sure I'm clear on
Yes.
Pete's suggestion?
Yes.
Thank you. Pete, the way I heard you say is that all new development and or infill development should have a rain garden. Are you intending that where we currently have a system, if you were building a new residential subdivision, let's use what Del Boca is doing up north.
Okay.
Dip between Gracie's and King's and Dutchman and Terrace and so forth. And so those had the water quality facilities that treated that entire subdivision. Are you saying do away with those and
No.
have each home? Because I want to make sure I'm hoping is that as we have the discussion, is what we're talking about is new development versus infill lots or people who might want to do rain gardens. And so my first thought is, well, new development, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. You know, we have these provisions and they build a new storm water detention and quality facility. Then we have situations where we have subdivisions that have vacant lots that haven't been developed yet, and they predated the stormwater. And then the idea or concept would be to put in rain gardens. Then we've got commercial and industrial development, where that's Mike's kind of bailiwick by and large, where they have to build their detention and their water quality facilities. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding all these different pieces. And hopefully we don't lump everything together, but we start to segregate them out so we can have a clear understanding of what the commission's talking about and what your desires may be.
Well, in that I was talking about new development, and I didn't think about infills. That might be something that you, if ever all the properties around there are predated that the regulations to have water detention systems, I really doesn't, that's not such a big deal. Although I would like to see encouragement from the city for, an educational, if you turn this into an educational for the citizens, as far as, look, we deal with huge amounts of rainwater infiltrating our pipes. We've spent $20 million upgrading our sewage treatment facility because we have such an influx, and a way that we can keep the costs down for all citizens of our city is if people will start building water retention facilities, rain gardens on their property. And, it's just like, going around and putting Save the Salmon stickers on, street grills. It's the same kind of idea.
Pete, can I ask you really quick, can I ask him a clarifying question first, Leonard, and then,
Yes.
then you can, okay,
Sure.
thank you. Pete, just to clarify specifically what the motion is that we're discussing, just so that I'm clear, my understanding was that this was a conversation about the 10-foot easement, right? And just allowing rain gardens within that 10-foot easement. And that's just specifically the recommendation, correct?
Well, that and that all that just what I stated about an educator,
Right.
that they're already pre-engineered so that people know how to build them.
But not required.
That they're not required necessarily for people that already predate, that are existing structures that predate any regulations, but that it's emphasized within the city, that it's, what is that? The Chehalem Watershed Council has plants. George Fox used to have a bunch of plants. But that, those plantings are, maybe the city opens up a little nursery where you can get plants. I don't know. But it should be a priority because it's one of the things that's costing a tremendous amount of money.
So, Madam Chair, can I clarify really quick? So I heard that the motion was to allow for rain gardens to be in the PUE, and that the city would put together some kind of standard drawings or something that would allow for that facility to be constructed in that PUE without disrupting the rest of the utilities that are in that. Is that kind of
That's part of it. Yep. And then,
Okay.
and then that we already have the stormwater retention systems in our new developments. But I don't know what those are scaled to either, Doug or Brett. Are they scaled to a 25-year event, or what are they scaled? What are the criteria when they build those things?
Yeah, so there's requirements on the design of those, but they're detaining through the different storm events from half of the 2-year through the 25-year event. That's what they're detaining those for, so that the flow rates stay the same pre and post.
Okay.
Leonard, you had a
But that's
question.
for the development that they're sized for. So.
In Habitat for Humanity, I proposed on 5th Street, I proposed a rain garden in the front yard, and they're doing pavers, so they need a smaller rain garden than normal. City says there's a 10 or 15-foot or 10-foot utility easement. They can't do it, so Habitat got an engineer, and he designed 2 separate concrete facilities that go beside the house. Now, other concrete facilities, I've been told, range in the cost between $7,000 and $15,000. So that's $14,000 to $30,000 added to a cost of a duplex constructed on a 50 by 100 foot lot. And if we're going to continue doing that, we can kiss off affordable housing, and that's not necessary. We're just getting carried away on this. And I love what Pete's saying is that, you know, Habitat Restore, about twice a year, you have to go there and clean out. There's too much vegetation. Things are growing. But with pavers and rain gardens, they have zero stormwater runoff. And our standards have been geared to controlling the rate of runoff, but they result in not recharging groundwater because we're increasing the runoff. And we should be attempting to maintain pre-development levels. And I found it's generally cheap and easy to do. It's just we aren't encouraging it, and we just seem to be throwing up standards and roadblocks to keep people from doing it. So I did a rain garden in Lafayette for the Red Tail Espresso coffee place, and all we did was to do a shallow swale about 8 inches deep in the areas that weren't paved. And the lady said, well, what are we going to do for landscaping? I ran out of money because she maxed out her credit cards. Well, I said, do nothing. And it sprouted with wildflowers. It looked absolutely beautiful. The city made us a jackhammer into the catch basin, go under a paved sidewalk, put in the catch basin with an expensive round dome on it. And every time I go by there, it's never, ever overflowed. And, you know, this stuff works. It's cheap. It can be done without landscaping. It can be done with a shovel. Anybody can do it. And we got to stop throwing up roadblocks and encourage everybody to do it. And if we keep this standards like Habitat, we're not going to be able to build a house because, you know, you can't add $14,000 to $30,000 to a cost of a house just for an infill on a lot that probably had a house on it before they started.
So this, we already have in the city regulations that require infills to have water capture systems,
I don't think so.
but
No,
Habitat is required to have that.
Actually, we do. Anytime you're adding more than 500 square foot of new impervious surface, you are required to meet the requirements of the stormwater management, which means detention and water quality. And there's multiple ways to do that, but yes, that is a requirement of anything that's creating more than 500 square feet of new impervious surface.
And actually the DEQ adopted standards, which you got that link today. It's for small cities. It's detailed codes. It's a written code. It's standard details. There's plans, specifications, everything. All the city would need to do to adopt this type of policy is adopt the accepted Department Environmental Code that was put together by several interested parties and environmental groups based on the experience, and we'd be done. We'd have a lot more options at our fingertips, but we're still working with 10-year-old stuff adopted by Clean Water Services, and we're just making it difficult.
Does anybody else have anything on this particular motion that they would like to discuss?
I think anytime you can get a permeable surface around developments, whether it be sidewalks or asphalt, or they use cobblestones in Europe. They do all kinds of things to make things more pervious. And, you know, some of the ground around here does not accept water. We just need an area to store the water so that it doesn't all just go to one place at one time. And I think that's what the problems are. And I know that's kind of how to solve it, is to kind of keep a dam on it. And I think Leonard and Pete are right. Anytime you can store water so it doesn't just go down the drain, it's going to be better for everyone. And somehow, I don't know how you do that. You know, there's gravel is a great storage unit. I know all the plants in the boulevard strips and all that matter as far as oxygen and that type of stuff, but they can also be storage units. So I don't see why you can't put, you know, rain gardens in planter strips and that kind of stuff, as long as you're able to maintain it. And that's, you know, that can be a problem.
Casey, you hit it's the maintain it. Do we have any planting strips between the curb and the sidewalk that are not maintained in the city of Newburgh?
Between the curb and the sidewalk.
Yeah, between the curb and the sidewalk, we have a planting strip.
Yep.
Street trees go in there, but
Yeah, street trees.
is there any
sidewalks.
part of the city that doesn't have that the people don't maintain that strip?
Down in the downtown area, maybe a little bit, but some of those don't even have that strip there.
The answer is hell yes. I mean, you can go through all kinds of neighborhoods and the grass is non-existent or dead.
Yeah.
Regardless of the season, it's not irrigated part of the time.
Right.
Or if the irrigation system for maintaining the vegetation fails, oftentimes it's just deadheaded off and allowed to just, or it is turned to hard surface. And there's no enforcement. There is enforcement if somebody pushes it in the neighborhood, but otherwise it's not.
Yeah.
There are a number of neighborhoods where the planting strip is just left. And my point is that there may be valid reasons that the homeowner hasn't been able to do that. And so when it isn't, then should the neighbors all be obligated? Should they be fined because they don't help their neighbor? Should we require higher taxes on the city so the city can come in and do it in exchange of the homeowner? The answer is no. It's not going to happen. I agree it needs to be done, but you look at what ODOT did when they put in the improvements on Springbrook Road. They probably had $750,000 in their stormwater capture plan along the east edge of Springbrook as they did the improvement. And it's been in what, Brett, a year and a half, 2 years?
3.
Probably 3 years, I think.
3 years. And there's big sections of it that are not maintained, overgrown, silted in. And when they were putting it in, I said, how's this? Because it was something that required serious attention, at least quarterly, and it's not done.
Which brings me to another.
Mike, that's one of those issues of, and Karen, correct me because you have all the details, but ODOT constructed it. They had their maintenance period with their contractor, and then they basically, per the IGA, turned those over to the city. And we recently went in and replanted all the trees because the trees died after 2 years.
Because they're not irrigated.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. So they become, this is playing off the issue of the maintenance of the planter strips. In town, we have planter strips that are 2 feet wide, and we have planter strips that are 5 feet or greater in width. It just depends on which roadway you happen to be on. And maintenance of those, by and large, rests with the abutting property owner to maintain those. There are a few areas in town where the city does maintain those particular planter strips. And when you get downtown, as Casey was talking about, we don't have planter strips. There may be a few side streets who have, a 3-foot grassy area between the sidewalk and the curb. So we've got, as a community being settled and then developing over time, we have basically a hodgepodge of a lot of things out there.
Which is to be expected.
Yep.
I don't agree. I don't disagree. It would be nice to be able to put this in. It just, for instance, right now, I've got a contract for $170,000 to do landscaping and rain gardens at the new George Fox building. The rain gardens are in and operating, but they will be maintained because they're owned by an institution that is obligated to keep up their own landscaping. But this went in spite of the fact that Leonard designed a regional detention area that was intended to take all of the stormwater from this 1.5 acres and treat it before it ran into the East Branch of Springbrook Creek. The detention facility is working and it had more than enough capacity, but it was effectively not recognized and therefore wasted. So I couldn't use it in spite of the fact that I had been promised that I could use it for the rest of my development.
This is like one of the easier things to do within a city to deal with one of our major problems. You know, of infiltration of water into our sewage pipes, of not getting groundwater recharge, all those things that go along with this. This is, you know, maybe we need to start, well, this gets back to like, you know, part of it is taking care of stream corridors. Okay, well, I happen to know that the city really doesn't have a full-time person looking at this stuff. There's somebody half-time. They do about maybe a half to a mile of stream a year looking at it. And we have a lot of stream miles that pass through our city. You know, it's just a matter of will. And it's a matter of putting in, of looking at this instead of looking at it as an added cost, as a cost saver. If you looked at, you know, cost benefit analysis, you would see that it probably has one of the highest ratings of anything that we're doing within our stormwater system, and with our sewage system. This just should be something that we just really push within the city, that it becomes, that the city facilitates it, that it's not just regulations, but that they're willing to walk alongside the citizens of the community to make sure that things are done correctly, that there's plants available, that there's recommendations available. A lot of it just people don't know. And you can get plants that conserve native, a lot of native plants that are really great for these stormwater facilities are available, and they're relatively reasonable cost. And, you know, and they survive the drought that we have every summer for 3 months. You know, there's answers to all of these things. It's not, it's just, we would get a huge bang for our buck by doing this rather than, and actually it comes down to this. We've been treating symptoms, it seems like to me. We have these symptoms that we put tons of money into, when really we need to, you know, any physician is going to tell you, we need to treat the causes so we don't have to keep continually treating the symptoms. Well, this is one of the major causes. So why don't we treat the cause, and the symptoms will probably be lessened at least. And if you do and I would like to see cost benefit analysis of, you know, so we hire a crew from the city that goes around every single summer and maintains these things, get them up to shape, you know, that there's a reservoir of plants available within the city, and we make these things work. And instead of spending $20 million on an upgrade of the sewage treatment plant, that's what I'm getting at. And if you look at these things in a cost benefit analysis way, you know, you reduce flows of I&I, you know, maybe you don't have to increase your pipe, you know, your pipe size and your pump size. You know, you don't have to, you know, do anything with the sewage treatment plant for 20 some years or 40 years. If we keep control of the stormwater. And that's really what I'm getting at here, and that the recommendation should be that the committee that, you know, this should be encouraged within the city. This should be encouraged to have every landowner in the city do this. And that we should be, you know, it's going to keep our water quality of our streams. We're going to have less sedimentation. We're going to have less erosion. We aren't going to have those peak floors in our stream corridors any longer. I mean, there's just so many benefits to it that it's ridiculous not to push it. That's really what it comes down to. We look at all these big projects, really it should be a really widely dispersed project over the scope of the entire area. And it would have a much greater impact than anything else probably that we're doing. Maybe you don't even have the need to do the piping. You know, I would definitely say we have the need to do lining of pipes so that we don't get the infiltration. But all the rest of it might be, don't even need it.
Well, I do know, talking to some of the city workers, that there are areas that need work. And this was what Leonard was referring to the other day, is talk to the people that have to deal with all this stuff during those big rain events. Because there's obviously places in Newburgh that have some issues with either reduced size pipes or, you know, areas where too much water collects all at one time and pops manhole covers and does that kind of stuff. And the maintenance crews know where those are.
I agree with you, Pete. I think that it should absolutely be something that the city encourages. I do appreciate, Mike, your concern, as well as Denise, your concerns as well. I do think, though, that the way Pete is making this, you know, easy to access in terms of providing suggestions or providing a handbook and for what people can do and how far down they can go so that they don't hit any utilities. I think that would be really helpful. But honestly, we just need, I believe, to open it up and have the option, whether it's required or not. That, you know, I see that happening and I'd like to see that happen, but whether it's required or not in this juncture, I don't know. But at least having the opportunity for an individual homeowner, because I've know of friends who've tried and have been unable. So at least having the opportunity to create rain gardens and then having those facilities in new developments. I appreciate, Doug, your perspective on mixing up, you know, what we're talking about when we're talking about development. So that's a concern and something that I definitely think, you know, we should speak to. But in terms of just bottom line, allowing rain gardens in the public utility easement, I also agree. I do not disagree with that. Is there any further discussion on this motion, or shall we take
one more thing to add? Someone in the nation must have done a cost benefit analysis at somewhere. I would like staff to find that, if they would, please.
A cost benefit analysis with what specifically?
Cost benefit analysis of doing, well, Portland, I'm sure, probably has done some cost benefit analysis of building water retention systems. You know, I mean, they built a big pipe that cost them, what, $2 billion to drill with one of those boring machines down along the river. You know, if, you know, it costs taxpayers a tremendous amount of money. What if they were capturing all that water before it ever got down? You know, it was overwhelming their sewage treatment plant. Same thing is happening in our city. The same thing is happening in all cities that have been established for a while in a rain area. If you aren't familiar with the big pipe, they brought those big boring machines in and bored, I think, a 2-mile long hole, you know, tunnel, basically to capture stormwater runoff, because it was going into the sewage treatment plant, and DEQ was fining the city every year for dumping raw sewage into the Willamette River. What are the, maybe the city makes a real investment in just getting rain gardens established all over the city. Maybe they even hire a crew to, install and maintain for 2 or 3 years. I don't know. But there's got to be some kind of cost benefit analysis of rain garden establishments in large areas compared to enlarging pipes or increasing this, stormwater holding capacity by drilling a tunnel or something. Somebody's got to have done that.
Yeah, I just playing off your comment, Pete, and I've heard several talking about more staff and nurseries and so forth. And not to say, cost benefit analysis would look at all that, but somewhere down the line, there's a cost and somebody has to pay for the cost to be able to do that. And so Mike played on, the elderly gentleman in his blocker, and he's out trying to maintain his rain garden. There's a cost, the family come in, and as Pete said, the neighbors come and do that. If you have more staff, given the financial resources we have, does that mean that the stormwater rates have to go up in order to have the staff to go do this? There's a trickle down effect. And so this is all great conversation, but you can't leave them in isolation. They have other pieces down the road that have to be considered as well.
But if you don't have to do as much I&I work, maybe some of that money goes to it. If you don't have to spend money on the sewage treatment plant because you've done this preventative maintenance, if you don't have to, enlarge pipes in certain areas because you don't have the I&I, because you're capturing that water. When you look at the costs of those things and compare them to the costs of hiring a crew or hiring a couple crews within the city and having a nursery that supplies plants, there's got to be some way of looking at this in a different way instead of just enlarging everything and dealing with the causes and not dealing with the symptoms and not the causes.
I'm not arguing with you, Pete. I'm just trying to make sure we put all the cards on the table when we have the conversations.
It'll have a cost, but maybe maybe the costs of doing those things are taking out of some of the other areas where we've put in tremendous amounts of money, and it doesn't cost the homeowners or the citizens anymore. It's just that we're redirecting funds that we already have to something that will address causes instead of just symptoms.
So
Also remember, if you spend $7,500 for like the habitat, you're going to pay another $210 if the homeowner's interest rate is 3%. So there's a cost by not doing what Pete says. And we might be better off, instead of building these concrete monstrosities, that we put the cost into building something that's nice and pleasant to look at and keeps the water runoff down and is something nice to look at. So technology sometimes it's not cheap, and sometimes it's just better to just dig a hole in the ground and plant some plants in it.
It's highly effective.
True.
Claren, did you have something to say? Something to add?
I've forgotten what it is for right now, so let you guys can continue your discussion and or vote on the motion, and I'll think of what it is, because it doesn't relate directly to the motion. So let me remember.
All right. Is there any further discussion on the motion? No. Okay, so shall we take a vote then on Pete's motion?
Just 1 second.
Yep.
Brett, did you take notes of that motion, or did someone actually write the motion? Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, can Karen
I think we
repeat
did
the
read-
motion?
Read that.
Restate it, please.
Yes.
So what I got with the motion was the committee is recommending that the PUE be able to be utilized for rain gardens and that the city would provide some standard drawings to allow for rain gardens to be utilized in the, or be constructed in the PUEs without impacting the utilities that also need to use that area. I kind of paraphrased a little bit, but I think that was the intent of the motion.
That's generally what I had written down as well.
Okay, let's.
Oh, I
let's-
have a question there. Is that legal? Or do the PUEs have some other reason?
That will be something that we will look at. Again, this is a committee recommendation, so we'll go back and double check and make sure that there's no issues within our franchise agreements or the PUC or anything like that. If there is an issue, we'll bring it back to this group.
Yeah, let me tell you the surveyor's perspective. There is a public utility easement, and there's also public utility easements. Are you confused now? So really, what do the words mean? I don't think anybody's really clarified it, but it's obviously two different, totally different opinions.
Okay, let's vote.
Well, I would like to add to that motion that,
Okay.
That there's an actual education and
So,
that we need to look at the causes of our issues with stormwater and not the symptoms, that we treat it at the cause of not having that infiltration of water.
question.
Can you, sorry,
Madam Chair.
yeah,
Pete,
go
can we
ahead.
make that a separate motion? Because that's a
Yes,
whole
we'll make that a
different
separate
conversation
motion.
that we need to have and issues around that. Just trying to make it easier for you guys to do one and then we can have the discussion about the other.
Is that okay, Pete? Okay, let's vote. I guess we will, if everybody in favor, raise your hand, please.
One point of order.
Yes,
Was there a second?
yes,
Yes.
Leonard seconded
Second.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody in favor, raise your hand. All right. Against, raise your hand.
Oh, against? I thought you said again.
Sorry, against.
You don't get to double vote, Mike.
I thought she said again.
I'm sorry. I don't have the lingo. I am not specific on the lingo. So thank you, Mike.
So I saw that.
Opposed. Raise your hand. Seeing none. Ayes have it. I couldn't see the vote. So Karn, will you let me know? Was it unanimous?
Yes,
In
it
favor?
was
Okay.
7-0.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mike.
I would like to make a motion that the city of Newburgh adopt Western Oregon water quality standards put out by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality.
I'll second that. I'm familiar with them.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Let's discuss.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So this is a discussion that has to be bigger than this group. If we were to
Okay.
completely wholesale adopt, any kind of standard update, when we take it to the city council, the first thing they ask me is, did you run it by all of the other developers and the people that would be impacted in town? So although, I would certainly have this committee, recommend that we evaluate it and look at it along with the rest of our standards, to wholesale have the city or this committee say we shall adopt it. I don't think they have that authority. Ultimately, the city council is the one that has that authority. Again, we can make a recommendation to review it and evaluate it and incorporate it, what works and what doesn't work, into our stuff with a bigger discussion with a larger stakeholder group further down the line. So that's my take on that.
Thank you. Leonard, would you like to change your motion then, given what Karen just said?
No. I think it's a no-brainer that we should be able to adopt those standards and kind of keep up with the standard of practice. Right now, we we're about 10 years behind in our standard of practice, and there's a lot of effort that went into adopting those standards, and they've been peer reviewed. And like I say, they're adopted by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality with the hope that cities in Western Oregon will adopt them. There's standard details in there, there's standard code in there.
I appreciate all of that, but it sounded to me like Karin said that we could not wholesale adopt this. And so
Well, we're
Well,
recommending,
we're only
What
making recommendations here. We aren't, the
Recommendations.
city council's the only ones that can adopt it. But our recommendation is that we adopt.
And
That's a different motion than what Leonard said.
yeah, Leonard did
Leonard
not
said
use
to
the word.
adopt.
recommend to adopt, to use the word we adopt specifically. Okay, so Leonard, would you like to,
I'll amend my motion is that our committee recommends that the city of Newburgh adopts the Western Oregon standard prepared by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality.
And just a point of order, I don't know what it is. I know that in this particular area where I've tried to chase yearly changes in standards, and now I'm saying, yes, I'll accept being responsible for complying with new standards that I'm not even sure what they are. But no, I can't support it without knowing what they are, what the consequences to developers is.
Brett sent out an email to you today that's got information on how to go through and read them, and they're pretty extensive. So
That's my point. I mean, you and I, Leonard, have chased this fantasy of complying with new standards for 20 years. We dug the planting strip down at Oak Meadows Loop so that we bring water in one end and bring it through essentially a rain garden out the other end. And all of these things are wonderful, but the people who pay for it are the developers and or the home buyers. And then when they don't, they require maintenance. Regional maintenance. No, I'd have to see what the standards are, what the requirements are.
they were adopted to come up with more ways. We had quite a discussion earlier on reducing stormwater and recharging groundwater, retaining it on site. Basically, that's what the standards are, is let's come up with some more friendly environmental solutions rather than just building more expensive structures and detention basins and things like that. So.
Brett, can we have the opportunity to continue to make recommendations on the next stormwater meeting? Is that accurate?
That'd be correct.
Okay. Mike, I appreciate your inability to be familiar with what this is. I also did not really get much of a chance. The email went out today to speak to your recommendation, or your motion, Leonard. I would also like the opportunity to read a little bit more about it. I appreciate your and Pete's perspective, but I think I also would like an opportunity to look into it. I don't know how to move forward here, I guess.
Well, Madam Chair, what you have is you have a motion
Yep.
on the table. It was seconded. Leonard modified his motion.
Okay.
That modification has not been seconded yet. So you're
Okay.
still having a discussion. So you would need a second on the modified motion. Then you could continue to discuss, and or somebody could just call for the vote.
Okay, since the motion has been made, we can't table the discussion until the next meeting to be able to have a better conversation, or
Will we actually will that be on the agenda, Brett, to have this discussion about those standards?
Yeah, we'll include it as an old business item.
Okay, then I won't need to second Leonard's motion at this time.
Okay, so now, just parliamentary procedures. So you had a motion, you had a
Yeah.
second, you had a modification to the motion, but you had no second. So now that takes us back to the first motion, which did not use the word recommend. So you still have to take a vote on that one, or the individual making the motion, Leonard, could withdraw his motion. And if the second agrees, then you could table it until your next meeting.
Okay.
Denise's shaking her head. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Doug.
Leonard, would you want to just table this till the next, where everyone has a chance to look at those?
If everybody in the city will take a look at them, sure, I would table it.
The committee, really.
I would love to go through and read them.
I have a second motion, or a third motion. I would like to.
Okay, wait.
Before we get there, Pete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Leonard, you're okay with tabling your motion to the next meeting?
Yes.
Pete, you're okay with tabling that? Okay. We're now tabled on that discussion topic.
Thank you, Doug. All right, Pete.
Okay, I recommend a motion that the city provide cost benefit analysis of different methods to treat the causes of the stormwater problems within the city. And those,
Pete, that information's available at Unified Sewage Agency or Clean Water Services. They've been doing it for 20 plus years, and I know that they've got books on that exact topic. So before we go further, my advice is that we ask for their resources to see what they have that we may be able to incorporate.
well, good. When I asked that question before, no one knew where to get that information. Thank you, Mike.
Clean Water Services.
Okay, and so is someone, Brett, Karen, are you gonna get that information for us and have it in the packet, please?
We can pursue that.
Okay.
All right.
I have another recommendation. We have basically 6 things that affects our stormwater and sewage. And, the cost benefit analysis should be applied to those 6. I&I, increased pipe sizes and pumps, or increased pipe sizes, increased pump size, increase to the sewage treatment, and any kind of reduction of sewage inflow through uses of different kinds of toilets or water. And then the last one is water retention system on properties within the city. Those things are what need to be addressed in that cost benefit analysis. And then at that time, I guess it's not really a motion. I would just like to have that information on those 6 areas. And then I would hope that we would find that the best cost benefit analysis, and if you need, whoever's finding that information, that, it comes out that water retention on the properties would be the best bang for the buck. In that case, then I would want the city to actually invest in that and to take some of the funds that go to the other areas, the other 5 areas like I&I and, increasing pipe size and things. Some of that money would go to actually having crews and infrastructure and plant material to actually make, rain gardens possible within the city.
So, and I'm just asking questions, Pete. Are you thinking that you would want to require this for all of the properties in the city?
No, well, I want us to look at a picture.
Well,
and
no, hold on, let me finish.
Okay. Yep.
Why I'm asking is that makes a difference in when we're starting to talk about how it impacts other things. if we're talking about making everybody do it, like just wholesale, everybody's property in the city must do this. That's a difference than the new development having to do it, or new development and people who want to do it. So there's layers here, and we can get you the information we have, but we need to be really careful about if we're going to say we want to do the best thing, which would be to require everybody in the city to do that. Again, that's a larger stakeholder group than just this committee, right?
Well, but we're making recommendations to the larger stakeholder group when this is going to be presented to the city council. And,
right.
But what I want to be able to present to the city council is that, we have 5 things that affect our sewage treatment plant right now. I that we are treating symptoms of a stormwater problem, really. Okay, that we're treating symptoms of a stormwater problem through I, increased pipe size, increased pump size, increased size of the sewage treatment facility, and then also that you have actually the amount of sewage that's going into the pipes themselves. Maybe you do more water efficient things, low flow toilets, things like that. And then you also have water retention. And if we have a cost benefit analysis of doing these things, maybe water retention comes out to be, very cost benefit. You get the biggest bang for your buck. Well, if that's the case, then we should really put resources into doing that so that we don't have to put so much. These infrastructure projects that we're doing are high dollar projects that cost the taxpayers a tremendous amount of money. Whereas if we could do citywide rain gardens that reduce I by 10,000 gallons per minute or 20,000 gallons per minute, maybe our problem goes away. And if we can do it for, $3 million instead of spending $20 million, maybe that's where we should go. That's the direction we should go. And we should actually subsidize landholders within the city and help them build those things and actually maintain them for 2 or 3 years. It's just a completely different way of looking at it than looking at just building these infrastructure projects, which are treating symptoms, not causes. That's what I'm getting at. So that's what I would like to talk about next agenda. Also, if we have a cost benefit analysis, we have these 6 areas that are that deal with our stormwater problem. And which one is the best? Which are the, we rank our projects 1 through 4. Maybe we're ranking the wrong projects. Does that make sense? I want to treat the causes, not the symptoms. And I think if by treating in medicine, you treat the cause instead of the symptoms for years and years, you have a much better outcome at a much cheaper price.
I agree.
And if that came down that it was required on every single property within the city, then we would take monies out of the infrastructure projects and put it into that, and maybe have a much bigger bang for our buck.
And I'm not arguing about the money piece. I guess where I'm going is for us to go tell everybody within the city that you're going to have to give up some portion of your property to put this rain garden in. And some people love that idea and some people will not. So that's where my head is going. So
well, we could say if you would like to put in a rain garden, the city will actually pay for it because it's going to save the city money and it's going to save the taxpayers. And if we got that rolling, there would be a lot of community pressure to do rain gardens with the understanding that we aren't going to have to raise sewage rates, that we aren't going to have to do those things. We aren't going to have to increase, do all these large infrastructure projects. If you could just line all the pipes instead of digging up the streets and putting a new piping in, that would be, highly cost effective. Where you don't have to increase in pipe size because you're actually storing the water on and it's infiltrating and going down into the groundwater in the city on the land where it originated.
Then you
And-
could
and-
also
So-
check the maintenance costs of these big, large concrete detention basins and stuff they're building too. I mean, that's an ongoing cost. And I'm not sure who pays for that. Is there a neighborhood association or does the city take it over? So the city's already involved in maintenance, right or wrong?
I don't think the city does those. It must be the homeowners that take care of that, don't they? Those
The
large
lar- No,
facilities.
the large
in
regional
development.
ones the city maintains. It's the individual rain gardens on properties the homeowner maintains. And right now although everybody is required to sign when they have a rain garden, they are required to sign a maintenance agreement that says that they will maintain it. It is not happening. So that would be the next piece of that puzzle also, is verifying that people maintain the facilities that are on there. But no, the larger more regional size ones are being maintained by the city, but the smaller rain gardens on individual properties are not. They are being maintained by the property owner.
So that Boca Vista development where they have that large stormwater facility there on the south end of the property, that's maintained by the city now?
Well, for the first 2 years, it's maintained by the developer and then it transfers over and the city takes the maintenance responsibilities.
Oh, wow, that's really a good deal for them. For the developer, I should say.
There's
That-
two,
that-
two of those facilities over there, Pete.
Yeah. I did not know that the city was taking over those.
Yeah, so if you went up, Pete, up to, again, Gracie's, Kings, Dutchman, and Terra Estates,
Yeah,
as the developer constructs those. And so after the 2-year maintenance by the developer, the city maintains the one at Gracie's Landing. I think we now have taken over the maintenance one at Terra Estates. The ones at Dutchman and Kings, once they get through their maintenance obligation, then the city will take over the maintenance of those facilities. Similar issue down off of Weatherly Way, north of the bypass, the new River Run subdivision. After they get through their maintenance, then this obligation, then the city will maintain that stormwater detention water quality facility.
so does the city then have a crew that goes around and checks these things and cleans them out? And
Yes, part of our public works maintenance operations. But as Karin says, we do not maintain the private rain gardens on property. So
Right.
if you went down off of Renfro Way, just south of Mission, and there's a combination of a water quality detention facility there that serves a subdivision, and then there's individual lots that also have rain gardens. And as Karin said, they had to sign a maintenance agreement, and they have the obligation to maintain
those.
their rain garden in their front yard.
Okay, I've done enough talking for tonight.
Thanks, Pete. Are there any further recommendations? Can we move? I know that we have old business. Leonard, we have on here your letter with storm drainage plan recommendations. This would be a good time to talk about those.
Is that the one where I recommend development standards and such like that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
it
that's the one
was,
from December 17th.
yes.
Storm drainage recommendations, referencing goals and retaining stormwater on site, and then some recommendations regarding commercial parking, ramification gardens, and regarding narrowing residential streets, and a few other items you had on that.
Right. In Newburgh, we got a one size fits all on street widths and such. And I think we should, well, I've been involved in quite a few planned unit developments over my career, which spans from my first engineering job in 1968. But I did Charbonneau at Wilsonville. In all those neighborhoods, the streets are 20 feet wide. And they do have inner streets that kind of connect the neighborhoods, and they're 24 feet wide. Well, street in front of my house, I think, is 36 feet wide. So the right of way is 60 feet, and you add another 30 or 40 feet, you can't talk to your neighbor across the street. So we're creating a place where people live, and they can't talk to their neighbors unless they walk across the street and introduce themselves. And I go to Charbonneau, and when a neighbor comes out, you end up talking to 2 or 3. Everybody's talking to each other. So, and it's a lot more efficient development. We can't keep having development standards for wide streets and going out into the farmland. I mean, when I moved to Newburgh, it was under 10,000 people, and it qualified for farm home loans. And now we're up to what, 23,000? That's from 1975. So that's like 45 years. Are we thinking ahead 100 years, 200 years, 350 years? We can't keep going on like we're doing. We can't build our way out of cars. We need to start getting more people. I would say, let's reduce the standards and say anything within 15 minutes of downtown, a 15-minute walk, we should have real higher densities. So, because a lot of cities in the world, they don't drive their car to the grocery store. I mean, they walk, and we're just hobbling ourselves. We're not thinking more than just a few years into the future. And we need to start thinking 100 years into the future. So I gave some standards that I have found it's workable and it creates nice neighborhoods. But the one that you quoted there on Renfrew Way, it's a 90-foot diameter cul-de-sac. You could have put 2 houses in there, and then you eliminated the need to have the cul-de-sac by requiring a fire access road out to College Street. So our standards are nuts, and I just don't understand why we're paving things. The thing Charbonneau did too is they created parking bays. So I did a little calculation that if you have a 50-foot wide lot, you're going to use up 20 feet for the driveway or 25 when you do the setback. So you can only park 1 car in front of your house. And that's more square feet of pavement than if you did parking bays. The other thing I don't like about my house, it's you can't talk to your neighbors. You'd have to holler because you can't hear people talk that far across the street. So I think, and part of it is we got to reduce our impervious areas because we can't keep adding impervious areas. And one way to reduce it is narrow the streets. Another way to do it is do paver streets. I've done a paver lot there at the Habitat Restore, and I had not a clue why George Fox, when they built a new parking lot, why they didn't do pavers. One of my clients says whether you do pavers, concrete, or asphalt, it all costs the same. So we can get the water quality and the stormwater detention without driving up the development cost now. It's just we have to make it more of the standard of practice. I gave some positive things, and we can't just approach it from the stormwater thing. We got to approach it from livability and efficiency and kind of look farther in the future. So basically that was the purpose of my letter.
I appreciate your focus on reducing impervious surface. I agree. I think that is critical in dealing with stormwater more effectively and more environmentally. I would say once we start talking about road widths, that seems to be a pretty big conversation. I don't know, that involves many other entities in the conversation. And so I would hesitate to make road width recommendations myself personally from this committee. But I do agree, and I do appreciate that reducing impervious surface is important. I will say on the one note, when it comes to removing bicycle lanes between the curbs, I think that what you were speaking to were bicycle lanes on the street, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I will just add my bit that my neighbor Roy lives behind me, is in a wheelchair. And I was speaking with him about bike lanes on roads and removing those and having bikes on sidewalks. And it was a different perspective than what me as a person who can walk around has. And it was interesting to me to hear that, you know, a wheelchair or an automated wheelchair is about 3 feet wide. And I don't know what the exact standard is right now for sidewalks, but it's very hard for bikes to get around people in wheelchairs, as I understand it, just with the width of the current width of a sidewalk. So I would hesitate on removing bike lanes from roads for concern of, you know, yes, I agree, we need to be focusing on reducing impervious surface, focusing on beneficial impacts to our environment and to stormwater and to the water table. But I want to also not forget that, you know, we want to have inclusivity, and there are people that have, you know, there are challenges, and we want to be able to include others in the design, and it's a different perspective than me who can walk around. And so I would hesitate recommending that we remove bike lanes from roadways, just so that with the understanding that, you know, if a sidewalk was big enough to have a wheelchair and a biker go by safely, we would still be having a large impervious surface because we would be making a bigger sidewalk. So that's just a thought that I had, a conversation I was having.
I just did a slideshow for the Rails to Trails. And one of the developments I mentioned was Hilton Head Island. And I got a picture there I took of an off-street bicycle path. And there's a jogger, a woman pushing a baby carriage, and a bicyclist, all using the same path in the same area. And this project was designed by Charles Fraser, and I got a picture of his plaque, and it states that he set up the standard for planned communities, and he kind of set the development standards from after World War II for decades into the future. But the last words of the plat says, "For a true vision of what he accomplished, just look around you." And I'm going to send you that and have you review that slide program. But you don't want your kids riding your bicycle next to cars doing 45 miles an hour. And what I'm advocating is, right now we're doing 2 5-foot sidewalks. Why don't we do one multi-purpose path of 10 feet? Well, actually we're doing 2 bicycle lanes. Is it 5 or 6 feet apiece? So we're doing 20 feet of improvement, half of which is built to arterial standards. And we could save a lot of money if we just built one off the highway path off on one side. We'd save a lot of money, and then we'd have something that all ages and all people of all kinds of mobility could use. And it's a money saving issue. It's an environmental preservation issue. It's a livability issue. It's creating a friendly community that you would like to live in.
So would that remove then the sidewalk on the other side of the road?
Sure.
how would a person with a wheelchair get up that side of the road?
Well, how do they get across the road now?
Well, if you are in a wheelchair, you have to go to a stop and cross. But what I'm saying is if you want to get down the block
Right.
between a stop sign, right, somewhere on the block, you have to be able to go on both sides of the road, because who knows, you may want to go on either, right? So I appreciate your perspective, but I think that there's a real ADA concern in terms of people need to have safe access to the whole community, right? And so my neighbor Roy needs to be able to get down both sides of the road safely.
Well, was a bicycle lane and a sidewalk. We could do both sides of the road, just take the bike lane out of the expensive 15 inches of structural improvement and go over to the 6 inches of structural improvement and have a wider path and have a narrower street. A narrower street means people probably will drive slower because they drive their comfort level rather than the speed limit. So if the road's narrower, they drive slower because it looks more dangerous. And this isn't rocket science, it's just more of common sense. And, you know, I asked that slide, I did, I said, which one would you let your 5-year-old, or which one would you take your wheelchair down, the bike lane on College Street or on the sidewalk of College Street? And I've never met a decision maker that wants to answer that question. But to me, the answer is obvious. It'd be better to have our pedestrian, bicycle, and wheelchair and baby carriage pathways separated from traffic rather than put an adult and his kids riding next to traffic down the bike lanes.
I
Lauren,
think,
you had, sorry, Doug.
I was just going to say, I think listening to your comment about the ADA accessibility and knowing Roy, and so if Roy was going to his neighbor's house four houses down and the sidewalk was on the other side of the street, this is a hypothetical, how does Roy to get to that house? He has no way to get out of his property. He'd have to get out onto the roadway and travel down the roadway, or go down and find an intersection to get across and go up a sidewalk, and maybe there's a curb. So yes, there are ADA issues, but I think there's another big piece of this, and I'm gonna throw this into your thought process, and I think Denise is a little bit aware of this. House Bill 2001. So the state has mandated that communities of Newburgh size shall allow duplexes everywhere where we allow a detached single family home. And in part of that administrative rule is that we cannot require more than one parking space for each duplex. So that means you have a duplex and all it has is 2 off-street parking spaces. So by design of that administrative rule, if you have a duplex and you have 2 cars and they fill up their garage with their stuff and they park one in the driveway, they're going to be parking on the street. And you could have that situation for both sides of that duplex. In triplexes and quadplexes, the maximum number of parking spaces that we can require off-site is 1 space per unit. So again, we have an ad hoc committee right now who's grappling through this and trying to understand what this all means. But the consequence of it is more cars parking on the streets. It's one plausible solution. The other is that they find some creative way to design the project and they create a parking field to park. And this would be a developer's choice. The city could only say, you only have to have 3. The developer could say, I'm going to put in 6. So he's increasing more impervious surface area on that particular lot. And so this committee, they're working through what all of this may mean on the community in the future. And right today, I don't have the answers.
Lauren, did you have something to add?
I was going to say, you know, as you guys are talking about things, you know, one other option rather than just narrowing things, because as Doug said, what I will say is I'm the staff liaison for the Traffic Safety Commission, and 95% of what we deal with is parking versus no parking. People parking where they shouldn't be parking. You know, I don't like where my neighbor parks, you know, both sides of that coin. Okay. So parking is a big issue. And if you start to narrow the streets, you start to limit the amount of parking. But, you know, another option is, you know, if the idea is to reduce impervious surface, you know, we can certainly, and again, we've already started looking at what can we do? Can we do not necessarily pavers in the public right of way, but can we do pervious pavement? Can we do pervious concrete for the sidewalks? We're starting to look at those options. Obviously, we're concerned about maintenance. How do you maintain them, and making sure we have the ability to do that, that it doesn't cost us a whole lot more to do that. But that's another way to get at some of these where you're not necessarily narrowing the streets in all locations, but it provides another opportunity to not create additional impervious surface. Now, I'll tell you that, and then our maintenance crews will be mad at me because they're not bought into the, in fact, a lot of people are not bought into pervious pavements at this stage in the game. Brett's up there cringing at this point. You know, they've come a long way since I first looked at them 10 years ago. And so, you know, maybe we can get there and allow for some of those types of treatments and ideas also.
So could we make a recommendation then that the city evaluate using pervious surfaces where possible within, you said not public right of ways, but it could be.
Well, we could, I mean, it could be in public right away. I'd be very careful about that, but you could certainly say anywhere that an impervious surface is going to be proposed, you know, maybe it becomes, and I'm talking, you know, as we think through these things and get into a standard type of thing, maybe that becomes part of the hierarchy thing as we look at pervious pavement. Again, assuming we can come up with a design for the public stuff that we like, is that, you know, first thing is you're putting impervious. If you can't put impervious, can you put in pervious for the bike lane portions? If you can't do that, can you do this other? And then you can get to a full impervious. Maybe it's something like that. But this committee could certainly recommend that we continue to evaluate that as we work through our design and construction standards and bring ideas back for what those options are. Maybe not to this committee, because we're going to have to, when we get done with our design and construction standards and work through all of those issues, we're going to have to go, like I said earlier, we're going to have to go out to a larger stakeholder group, and we can get their feedback also. And we can include this committee on that. It may be whether you guys are still actively working or not when we get to that stage is, you know, we'll have to see, but we can certainly include the people on this committee if they want to be a part of that discussion and conversation before we put it in the standards and then take it up to the council for their adoption of the standards. Just a thought.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I would like to make that recommendation. So I guess I would like to make the motion to recommend that we, that the city use pervious surfaces wherever possible in evaluation, and that pervious surfaces become part of the cost evaluation of projects moving forward.
I second.
I would agree with what you're saying, and I understand. I haven't done a development in the last 15 years where I haven't looked at pervious versus impervious and tried to come up with an understanding of cost benefit analysis. I'm sure that Brett and Karen both are aware of the body of literature that exists on that particular topic. There's a lot. And there are a number of reasons that, and they're all valid reasons, that you don't see more pervious development, particularly in this part of the Willamette Valley. We did some work on the field, which is out there in the Springbrook Oaks area near where the retirement homes are and Oak Meadows Loop and others. Prior to that, there was a company called Sumitomo that wanted to come to town, and they wanted to build a big wafer plant. And part of their due diligence was an extensive scientific analysis of the soils and the ability of the soils to transmit vibrations and their stability. And it went on for many thousands of dollars. The result was the soils engineer said, I've never seen soil that as impervious as what you've got. It said it's just slightly more pervious than asphalt. And in fact, if you till it and you keep it fluffed, it's pervious for about 8 inches, and then it proceeds to get hard. So, and it relates to it. And the same thing is that pervious asphalt, in spite of the new advances, is less durable and requires more maintenance than impervious asphalt. But I've looked at it. I was interested because, as I said before, I'm putting in at the George Fox building extensive stormwater management. And I thought, well, I can maybe avoid some of the cost of having to bury 36-inch diameter pipe to hold water once it gets out of my rain garden so that it can be discharged evenly. So the detention ponds are all under the parking lot in pipe. And I was hoping to be able to avoid some of that, but I couldn't. And it wasn't because we didn't try. So I think most developers, understanding the cost of having to put asphalt or concrete down, understand that if they could avoid some stormwater mitigation expense by putting in pervious services, they would do it. But there are only some areas that it works in. And contrary to what Leonard was told, pavers cost more than asphalt. Maybe not for the raw material, but the cost of labor in installing it is.
My source was a builder that builds paver streets.
Well, you can go to Holland, Amsterdam, but pavers require it depends on what kind of traffic you're going to roll on it. But the tractor trailers, the office building I built there by Fred Meyer has a drive. It's technically a private drive, but all of the trucks that supply the food store, the Cisco trucks and the bigger trucks, use that drive to get from Brucher to the Fred Meyer parking lot. And they've torn it up with the weight that they have to run over that road. And you look at the rest of Newburgh streets where they've been paved, Brucher. Karin was talking about repaving Brucher, and it's partly because of how much heavy traffic is heavy. I mean, not lots of traffic, but heavy weight traffic that's been on it to break up the road. So, as I said, there's no easy, inexpensive answer, or somebody would be doing it.
That perspective. I appreciate it. I know that we had so it sounds like, Leonard, did someone second the motion?
I heard Leonard seconded that motion.
Okay. All right, so is there any further discussion? Doesn't sound like there's further discussion. So let's, can you repeat the motion, Karen, as you understand it, please?
Right. So Doug can correct me, or Brett, whoever got it written down also, was recommending that we use pervious surfaces where possible. And the evaluation becomes a part of the cost benefit of building whatever it is for pervious surface.
Okay, thank you.
I get that. I got the same thing, Car.
Point of clarification, is this
Yes.
a recommendation or a requirement that would be checked on building permit application time?
It was a recommendation, not a requirement. Yeah, I appreciate asking. All right, let's vote. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay. Opposed, raise your hand. I couldn't see everybody. If you can let me know what the vote was.
It was 6-1 and
Thank
Mike
you.
was the no.
Okay. All right, that recommendation, the motion passed. Are there any, let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to find the. All right, let's move on to what was the next piece in old business staff memo?
The staff memo is more just as information to have for your discussions as you move forward with policy discussions related to first Leonard's email plus, or Leonard's letter plus with any other discussions you have, just to recognize that some items carry into a larger perspective is needed to engage. And so if there's any questions on that memo, then we can entertain those.
No further questions. All right, are there any public comments?
I had not received any public comments prior to the meeting. Karen, I don't believe I'm seeing anybody, any public or attendees other than,
Nope, just
Nope.
us.
so no public comments.
Okay, items from staff.
Probably, I guess the main item from the staff would be the update on the schedule. We kind of, with our Stormwater Master Plan update, we've shifted the schedule around and added a date into there to have a third meeting, as well as providing this meeting for the policy discussion. So I just want to make certain everybody's aware with those dates, that you got that information. So. And I believe, just as a follow-up, I believe everyone should have received their cybersecurity training items, or some of that still, the links for that information.
It's still in process.
Okay. I know a few that are still that way, so I keep hearing that it's moving
I'm
forward.
still in process also.
Okay.
I was
Right.
afraid I'd have to take it a third time, but I didn't. They let me
Yeah.
go.
You took it twice?
I took it twice.
Okay, one of hers is mine then.
I'll pass it along, Mike.
That's right.
Sure.
All right, do we have any, oh, sorry, go ahead, Brett.
Just one other thing, I just want to thank everyone for the discussion and all the ideas and stuff that are being presented here, because as Karen mentioned, we're gathering information and ideas and things. We're at the very early stages of this process. We were doing this master plan update. We had one of the pieces in this was looking at some of the design criteria, and I find it invigorating that there's an active discussion and ideas being presented for moving forward with and finding the things that work. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I can't wait till somebody says I can build a rain garden in my yard.
Well,
You
in
can
your
build
yard,
a rain garden in your yard, Denise.
you can.
No, not,
Not in the peak.
I don't have room.
That's
for
the,
it.
that is the,
That starts to become the challenge. And we've had these conversations with Doug as the lots get narrower between the street trees and the fire hydrants and the utility vaults and all those kinds of things. We're running out of room in those front yards. So it's going to continue to be a challenge.
Yeah, this is trying to be more efficient with the land supply that we have. Brings about other new interesting challenges of how you have all of the infrastructure to serve those smaller lots.
All right. Are there any items from committee members? All right, I don't hear anything. So I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Seconded.
Second,
All in favor? Raise
aye.
your hand. Is it unanimous? Opposed?
Looks like it.
I think everybody wants to go.
Opposed. Okay. The
I've been in
meeting is
this chair
adjourned.
since 7 o'clock this morning. I want to go home.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.